Welcome back, guys, to the Hive podcast. Today we're going to talk about something really exciting, which personally excites me as well. It's kind of the core of every venture, which is like branding, marketing, and communication. And we're going to have this discussion with our podcast producer and brand curator of Hive, which is Tess. Welcome, Tess.
Thank you.
So, if we start at the basic, because of course people talk a lot about branding, marketing, and it's a very big spectrum, right?
It is.
What would you say is the difference between branding and marketing if we start to explain this from an easy point of view?
An easy point of view, yeah. It's a really good question to start off with. It's something indeed that sometimes is being used interchangeably. But for me, the key difference is actually that branding is really about who you are. That's where you can talk about your values, give personality to the brand. And marketing is how you bring it to market. It's really about the how you're selling it. And that's where you can do your campaigns. That's where you can do your events.
Is that more the execution side then of your... So if you would start building a brand before you start on the marketing side, right?
Yes, that would be the ideal approach. But what you see happening a lot is that a lot of companies actually start out with a campaign or with an event or with social media. And then in the end, it becomes really hard to determine like your why, who is actually behind the brand, who is this and who are we dealing with and what are actually the values that the end consumer can actually align itself with.
How do you, because what I've seen a lot in pitch decks is that people actually have a very good why and a very good story, but it always doesn't come through in a pitch deck because the coloring is ugly, or like, how do you value the visual aspect from a brand as well versus the why? Because I think it's quite...
It's a really good question. And of course, you also know me a little bit, and this is where we really place a lot of value. And actually, we have a great eye for detail, I would like to say. It's about how the brand also presents itself, because through color use, through your logo, through actually also the name of your brand, right? And then there can be even a different company behind it. It's actually really important to communicate that through the different visuals that you're using. And this is where there's also a lot of color theory and a lot of psychology behind the kind of words that you're actually using and how that comes across to the one who's reading it.
But you point out like the coloring, because I've seen how you build out coloring palettes, almost like when you choose paint with to paint your house. Palette. It's very like a whole palette. But how important is the visual aspect towards how people look at it? Is there like a psychology behind it?
Yeah, there is. There's actually entire studies done on this, on the effects of the different colors that one is using. Also, there's like a cultural aspect to it. In certain cultures, you cannot use certain colors, or you can, but that has a vastly different association than your intention actually is behind using that color. So yeah, it's definitely very important, but I would say it doesn't trump your story. It doesn't trump your why. That's of course the essence of your brand. And I rather sit with someone who has the story down to a T and is really clear on the values behind the brand and the direction that it wants to go long term, then it's easier to just change your colors and your color palette around
it's easier
that.
to fit the coloring and the visual around the story than if you don't know your why, then you can put any color from red to blue to
and still
whatever.
It's not going to come across.
No. Okay.
No. But this is also where you see a lot of companies actually in time changing their logos or changing their colors. There was also a trend not too long ago where instead of having a 3D logo, a lot of known brands actually went down to a 2D logo because that's much easier to use also online. And as we are communicating more and more online with one another, that is a much easier way to communicate with your audience than having like the intricate 3D logos, because that's how you presented yourself offline.
Yeah. Okay. No, cool. I very much like the branding aspect. When you go shopping, you shop with your eyes. And I think it's the same with ventures, especially in food and agriculture where we're working in, that you don't eat something that doesn't look nice, right? It could be tasteful, but I think they did it with like Heinz, where they had like green ketchup they tried, but people didn't eat it. So all of these things. On, let's say you have your brand, and on the marketing side, like what do you think are important things to focus on in the beginning, as if you're just a young company? Because I think what I've also seen is that people have big budgets on marketing. Of course, if you're retail, then you need to have the space in the stores, which costs money. But how would you say, like, could be some easy tips and tricks on
starting points, right? It's really really important that there's an understanding in the team that without a brand you can't really market, because otherwise it simply won't stick. So especially if what you see, a lot of these products are actually born out of great ideas because there's a need for it in the market, and then that's already your why, because you're trying to solve a problem, you're tackling something, or it comes from your personal experience that it's something you were missing, or something that happens in your surroundings that you offer a service because that was lacking, or there's a ton of different reasons to start actually creating a product. But the why behind that needs to be then really clear, and then you can start with being just visible, creating visibility, and it doesn't have to necessarily from the get-go be super slick, and you don't need to have a amazing color palette, but that's where you just need to start, get that message across, and that's where you can definitely use your website, and you can attend events, and that's where your marketing then comes in. So that's when you start taking those steps in your marketing. As long as you have your key messages clear, your why is clear, then you can build around that with any kind of budget. You can make it as big as you want, or
you can do 10 events or choose one event where you go to and have the visibility would be like the first, really to show your brand and to talk about it and to tell you why.
And it's important to also then go to your niche. So it's a problem you're solving. So also go where people experience this problem, or where the off-takers of such a service actually are, or there are a ton of different ways where you can then be visible with either like a very small budget or a very big budget, and there's always something you can do from that point of view.
Well, I think this will resonate with a lot of people, because I have a lot of discussions when you talk to friends, family about that have their own companies, and well, more kudos to you. Like a lot of them think we have great branding, and I personally believe that as well. So they always ask how do you do it, and how do you do these things? And I think it's a lot of it is also a style. What do you like, what you don't like, because I think it's also a reflection of you, of yourself, how you make a brand and develop a brand. So I think it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I also think it's important that you understand that there's a lot of trial and error involved as well. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just stand behind your key messages and then just go and do something. And that's also something, well, you always tell me as well, that's where we can learn a lot, is that it's okay to just try something and do something just to test it. And that's another thing, that's where A/B testing on your product, so on your marketing, is like you need to have different versions out there to understand which one actually works the best with your audience. And for me, it needs to be perfect, needs to be good. But of course, for that, you need your audience's data. You need to know what it is that you do, because you can think it all up in your head. You can all take it from the books, you can take it from the theory, you can all like it and stand behind it, but if in the end that's not what resonates with your audience, it's wasted.
Yeah, well, but it's also the thing that things that we can think is very pretty and beautiful and looks amazing might not be the same for 80% of people that would buy the product.
Exactly.
And it's like when you shop clothes for your kids, what we were actually discussing earlier, but it's not what I think that's beautiful that they think is beautiful. So it's
that's where you collect your data, right? That's where you get your input.
Yeah, that's where you get your input on a daily basis. So I think pretty clear, and thanks for that. So of course, if you look at from an investing point of view, and we've done this before, there's always different messaging, right? We have the fun side, which is the investment side, where you want to tell the big story. That's the why of the fund.
Of the fund, of what we do exactly, our efforts.
And then you have the ventures. So how would you, because it's still part of the same portfolio, how do you say we kind of have to differentiate in that?
It's a very good question. And that's also where, of course, our challenge lies, right? So for us, it's important that as a fund, we communicate stability. We communicate our thought leadership. we share knowledge. So that's also why I love that we're doing the podcast together. Because in the end, you need to be trustworthy. You need to build your credibility. That's also where you can show your track record, right? So that's also how you position yourself as the person within the fund. And then for the ventures, of course, there's a whole different roadmap, basically, because you first want to establish what are we actually doing? What is the need in the market? And then build the brand around that. And from there on, of course, that could be either a B2B product or a B2C product. That's then the result of that research that we're doing beforehand. And there it's about the impact that this product actually can have for then the end user.
And probably also for the end user, and then also link it back to the investors or the LPs in the fund that probably resonate with the why. So that you almost link the story back from the venture, like, hey guys, this is why we're doing it. Do you think it's also important to really tell the story from, let's say, because we start ventures from really like an exploration phase where there's nothing. But how do you see that using that story or that experience towards the investors? How important do you think that is to tell it to them and to show, hey, this is how we do it? Because I think it is showing them this is our thought process.
It is, yes. So that's also where we have a bit of the 3 different pillars, right, that we discussed also the other day. So, of course, being a venture builder, this is where it's important where you also put your ventures on the pedestal. And this, of course, also will resonate most with at least the investors that we have up until now. They really want to know where we are making a difference, where we are being innovative with, in the end, the products or the companies, the ventures that come out of our efforts. So I think this is exactly also what you're saying, where the excitement lies. That's where you can actually grab the attention.
Yeah, and then we've discussed this many times. I think people, especially new ideas, people always think they need money. But I don't agree, because even with 50K, 100K, you can do so many different things by also thinking outside of the box, by building a nice brand instead of just focusing on the wrong things and maybe on scaling too fast, like sales, marketing, branding, things that we also like to do. I think we can add a lot of value, even in the stable things where you say, maybe, okay, guys, you've done this. Maybe if we add a little bit of, let's say, hive, hive spice, that we can also make it different. This is what really excites me, adding some like skill sets from outside of the finance world into the finance world. You can make it also a lot more sexy and brand sexy, and same for funds.
And have it then also resonate with a larger audience, of course, with the new generation and all these things, because there is, of course, a movement happening in the world with the new generations on how we communicate. But the finance world will always be here. That will always be part of the system, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But in order to communicate those services and those products, you do need to venture a little bit more into, well, the new way of communicating with your audience.
Well, it's actually a good one, because like lately there's like a lot of buzz and criticism around finfluencers, right? That people give financial advice on Instagram and then something goes wrong and they, oh no, I don't give financial advice. But the fact that so many people relate to them is because probably they like the story, they like the brand, who knows what they represent. Of course, you have a lot of this in crypto, but how I would see it, and I don't know how you see this, that it's a massive opportunity for the finance industry, basically to build out like maybe a more sexy brand or tell the story differently, because it's just what people need. And we live in a branding society.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, I think a year and a half ago, I saw an ad by a Dutch bank. And it was so far removed from reality. It was about the housing crisis and how to get a mortgage. And they really wanted to make that more insightful for their customers. But they completely missed the point by a mile, because they thought they were offering solid advice. But they were offering solid advice for only a select few, and not for those who really are in the midst of not being able to find a home, not being able to overbid on houses because they simply do not have the resources for it. And to me, that's they used a new way of communicating, but they really didn't understand the audience.
Yeah, but you see,
and then it's almost a bit offensive, I want to say, because then it does not only not resonate, but it also, they are supposed, it was from one of the bigger banks in the Netherlands, they need to be accessible for the consumer to go to them with their problems and not be told, if you don't have this and that, it's not going to work, period.
Yeah. So you believe there is a big opportunity actually in kind of what we do
yes.
and in telling the story where you have like the basis of a very strong experience, like sectors behind us, and then combining that with the ventures and the exciting stuff, but even make the boring stuff more beautiful and then tell the story in a different way that it resonates with more people. So
exactly.
That's probably also kind of a link to another thing that's important, which is more communication.
Yes.
Where you
communication.
You love communication.
Yeah.
It's well, I just told you before, we've been told that we're not always that good in communicating, but I think communication is very different from storytelling, right? Or would you say that it's related to each other as a first thing?
It's definitely related to each other. Storytelling is a part of communicating, because communicating is what we are doing now.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, also when I was studying this way back when, we of course also went through the evolution of communication and how it was first just person A talking face to face to person B. And then of course the telephone was invented. So then it already changed, because it's a very intricate thing, because depending on the medium that you're using, your communication also has to change, because either you're not seeing their face, or on FaceTime you are, but then it's like you're in a different environment. So without making this too theoretical, but that's what I love about communication. I would not say that I'm necessarily very good at the face-to-face communication, being an introvert myself, but it's definitely, if you talk about storytelling, it's a part of communication. It's a way to tell your story.
Yeah, it's like social media is, well, no, that's actually a technical execution on where you communicate.
What medium you're using, exactly. But a picture is also communication. A movie as well. It's about how to get your message across. Yeah. And I think looking at what we are doing, you have two different players. For instance, like you have the investors, the LPs on the one hand, and then you have the venture builders, and then actually the audience behind that. So the users,
the target audience.
Exactly, the target audience after that. So that already creates another player. But if you look at these two, if you talk about how the fund, how Hive should communicate, that's already two different ways. Because with one, you're basically looking for LPs and you want them to trust you and you want to bring them on board because you want to do something together. And with the ventures, you also want to bring them on board, but in the end, you want to work together with them, almost as like a trickle down effect.
Yeah, but it's actually very complicated if you think about it. So because if you complicated, you need to be very careful on how you communicate to whom. Yes. For even within the LPs, you have different kind of communication strategies where maybe to a high net worth individual you talk different than towards like a family office or to an asset manager who's very technical focused and so maybe to the one it's more informative and technical, and to the others it's more about the story, the why. It's really interesting, but I think also for people to know that in any business that you do, you need to be really clear on this is my story, this is my target audience, and then really define the communication from the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly, and what need are you solving for them? So I was actually wondering, what is, in your opinion, the most underestimated part of communication when talking to LPs?
The most underestimated one is, it's a difficult one. I think what people underestimate, I think people talk a lot about the why, but maybe not enough about the product or the problem that they're solving. I think a lot of people talk technical. That's shouldn't be I think people want to know the story, the big picture. And I saw a podcast lately from somebody else where they say it's all about the people. In the beginning, it's about people. Later on, it's about metrics. And I think people focus too much on metrics instead of on the story and the problem and how can we solve it together. Yeah.
So rather than performance from the get-go, it's about people. Who are you dealing with?
I think if you're But I think this is where we are different. Maybe is when we want to get involved, we get involved, because we wouldn't choose anything where we say, okay, I like this, the metrics look nice, but I don't really like that product. We choose things that we know, okay, we can add value here. This story is something that we resonate with and that we can build, and we can also tell to others. Because if not, I think what's the fun in it, you know? So this, to me, and I think to us, it's really important to focus on things that we like, that we believe in, and that we think is cool above metrics. Because if you tell a story, you need to believe in it.
Okay, that's actually a really good one.
Yeah, well, then what about PR? Because we haven't touched on PR, and PR is something that I've always been intrigued by.
It's a very powerful tool, isn't it?
It's a very powerful tool, and it's very much, from what I've seen, I have some friends in PR, that it's compared to the whole branding and the marketing, it's a very, or like the creative side, PR is always like the little brother or little sister that comes along. Yeah. But it's so powerful in the end.
It really is.
So should people focus a bit more on that? Or in general, should the industries focus more on PR strategy combined with a branding strategy, instead of like keeping it separate? Or usually it's like an emergency thing that we need to solve something, like let's bring the PR.
Yeah,
and
it
then
becomes part of your crisis management. Yeah. That's when I think also where, I don't want to say all, but vast majority has the association with PR, is that only comes to play when there's a crisis that needs to be handled. But in my opinion, that's not really true. I don't think a venture that's just starting out needs to focus heavily on PR from the beginning. I don't think that's the case. I think much rather focus on what we discussed before, so on your branding, and do the initial marketing steps, especially looking with your brand on the long term, with marketing on the short and midterm goals. And then PR is something that will come into play, especially when you are actively involved in the market.
Yeah.
And when the other people in the market are looking at you as a key player. So you already have to be, in my opinion, a key player. You can also do this when you are active in your niche, and then you become a bigger player in that niche. And then when you have an announcement that something is happening within your company, or there's something happening with your company and another company, so you enter into a partnership, or there's a big offtake agreement, or something big that
relates to your public, actually.
That's impacting. So basically your activities has an impact on the market. Okay. And that's when I think it would be wise to start really talking about it and making your statement.
When you've got a bit more like thought leadership, things like that, when people see you like that, and then you know also that actions that you do will have impact. So you also need to manage that.
That's what I was looking for. Exactly. So, but you know your actions will start having bigger impact, not only on your own company, but also on everything that's surrounding it. Of course, you can immediately start from the beginning with publishing press releases, which is one way, because if you look at your SEO, you want to score high. So if a lot of different media outlets are talking about your company and about your brand, then of course it's one way to have more appearance, to rank higher. But I don't think your efforts need to go there from the beginning. First, focus on your why. Focus on your
I think it's maybe even in that one, when you have your why and your brand, and that when you send out messages, that you send it out to the specialized newspapers or websites in your niche and in your sector. So
if you're attending an event, you can, of course, reach out also to journalists who you know are usually reporting on those events. Yeah. Then, of course, you can give an interview, and you can ask them to come have a look at your facility or test your product. Of course, those are much smaller things you can do, but I wouldn't necessarily go there as a first step. It will come down the line.
So focus on the branding, then the marketing and the storytelling. And of course, if you make a product, focus still on your product instead of just the story, because then maybe something else that, of course, we've been working together, I think, for almost like five years, right?
Yes.
I think time flies. But even where we are, especially, it's quite a men's world, right?
Yes.
How do you experience that? Especially because you're also young.
Still, not too long, but
but how to be active as a woman in food and tech, and how does that? Yeah, how do you experience that?
it's very exciting, but it's also a balancing act. It's something that I have to learn still, and I had to learn a lot, especially in the beginning, about being assertive without being immediately dismissed or labeled as something, I don't know, too over involved, I would almost say. Because, of course, there's like that aspect of being a woman in tech and food, but it's also about being passionate. And that's sometimes where it's a balancing act. And also, I do feel sometimes I had to prove myself twice as hard.
Yeah.
In terms of my expertise and in terms of having an opinion about certain matters.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this underestimation, or like the people underestimate you. But I think it's also in sometimes even more age, sometimes combined. But it shouldn't be a reason, right?
No, but I kind of understand it. But it's also something, like I said, you will learn over time. I think it's not necessarily gender related, but of course, when you're just entering the market, you're just fresh out of school, let's say, you're full with ideas and you're sure that you're the one who's going to change the world and you're the one who's going to be the best at everything. And it's also a good humbling experience, I would say, that if you surround yourself with a lot of people, and especially people from all different ages, and not just on your professional journey, but also as a person.
Yeah.
And then you actually, now that I'm getting a little bit older, you also start to realize and learn more about who you are as a person. And you realize that you're also bringing that person, whether that's to your private life or your professional life, you're always with yourself. And as soon as you accept that, and as soon as you know your own value and your own worth, and I'm really, really glad that I get the chance, and I'm also being recognized from that perspective by you and David, to really be a valuable member of the team and to work together.
Yeah, because I, of course, know you like better and better over the past 5 years, and I also know that you're someone that has a lot of responsibilities for getting things done that are not maybe per se in your role, in your job description, as they say it. So I know now within Hive we're focusing a lot more on like branding and like the podcast. What does that do with you energy wise? Because I think it's probably cool that you can focus a bit more on what you actually want to do.
Yes, it 100% is. And it's really also this creative outlet, because as you're saying, it's 100% true. When at a certain point, your signature in your email, because you are writing from a certain department, doesn't really match with that activity or that connection that you're actually emailing with. Just because I took over responsibility from someone and I love to do that, it just wasn't always born out of passion. It was rather a necessity.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that now it's coming more from my passion. And I really love to give more shape to what we're doing with Hive from a marketing perspective, but also work together with the ventures and really build ventures from scratch. And maybe there's a venture down the line that's already a bit further along, and I also can't wait to think alongside the founders there strategically what we can do to enhance the brand, or what other marketing efforts we can either do together or start introducing them to my network. So it's something exciting and something that gives me a lot of energy, actually. So
but I think it's cool. I think I think we all know within our team, we're very self-aware of what we're good at, and I think it's really energizing now that with Hive we can also really focus each one of us on what we're really good at and like to do. So, are there things that you would say, any tips that you would have to women or like young women in food or in tech or in general that you think of that could help them?
Yes, it's something that I haven't always done from the very beginning, but really getting your hands dirty and working alongside everyone within your company. So let's say you're hired, and it's something we say in the Netherlands, right? Like the marketing meisje.
Yeah.
It's for those who are not Dutch, that's the girl who comes in, guys, it's time to make a TikTok, it's time to make a reel, come on, let's go, join me in my creative plans. Especially if you are a marketing professional and you have the chance to really get to know the company inside out, because you need to gather your information, because that's what you're going to use in your marketing efforts, and that's what you're going to use, whether that's for internal communication or external communication. Really ask the questions from people and work alongside them. The flip side of it is that maybe you're not always immediately recognized for your strengths, so that also means you can go a little bit into stealth mode and gather a lot of information and gather your thoughts. And when it is then time to get to the forefront and to really come out, you have heaps of information and you can base your opinion off of so many different aspects. I think that's then where you can turn that almost disadvantage into a strength.
Yeah.
And that's also where, if I reflect back on the past, I actually should have done much more from the beginning, really. Just work with people, sit next to them, ask all the questions, because you can. It's like also we are so easy at making conversation, so just use that to your advantage.
Yeah, okay. Asking questions is in general something that people always say there's no stupid questions, and well, there are, I think, but some of them in general, I think it's good to ask questions, but people don't do it enough. Especially if you're in a creative role, the more questions you ask, it's like in sales, the more you know and the more you can target to it. So it's kind of like take initiative, ask questions, and then work from there. Okay. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
Well, to add to what I just said is also don't shy away. Your opinion matters.
Yeah.
And I've also seen that the more pushback you actually get, the more right you can be. I'm not saying that you're always right, but actually that usually means you're touching upon something that the other person doesn't necessarily want to hear, but is actually true. So it's about not shying away. Cool. Be visible.
But also make yourself visible and be present and be in the room, and don't let other people
steal your limelight. No, definitely
no, I think that's okay. Well, thanks a lot for sharing your perspective and experience on working over the past 5 years with us, and also how you look at branding, marketing, and clear communication. How important it is actually to build companies. Well, we see it at Hive as well, how important it is and what it can bring. I think what we've done over the past years with our brand, I think has been really, really cool. I think this could be a good closing remark. So for everybody, I hope you found it valuable, and make sure to follow the Hive podcast and share with somebody who's building a company or building a venture. And thanks a lot. Stay focused, stay sharp, and keep building. And thanks a lot, Tess.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thanks. I go back to editing this now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.